Okay, so how many of us really, enjoy those long lectures back in school? Not many, I'd bet. And turns out even teachers are starting to think the same way.
Really?
Yeah. So today we're diving into this story of an English teacher who just totally flipped his classroom.
Oh, wow.
His name is Mr. Semsem. And his story, I think it has something for anyone who's ever felt like, learning could be a little bit more hands-on.
I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Totally. So we're taking this deep dive based on a podcast episode where Mr. Semsem, he really opens up about how he went from be that traditional lecturer to something completely different.
I'm intrigued already. What was the catalyst for this transformation?
Well, it all started with a little feedback.
Uh-oh. The kind that makes you squirm a little.
Exactly.
Yeah?
His supervisor observed one of his classes and, pointed out that things were a bit too teacher-centered.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it was like Mr. Semsem at the front, talking away, students politely listening, but not really, doing anything with the language.
That's pretty common, though, right? It's easy to get stuck in a routine.
Oh, absolutely. And to be honest, Victor Semsem's first reaction was kind of defensive. Like, who wants to hear that their methods aren't working?
I can imagine. But sometimes we need that outside perspective to help us grow.
Right. And his supervisor had these two main points. One, make the learning more student-centered. And two, shake up those interaction patterns.
Oh, okay. Those are some solid points, especially for language teaching.
Totally. But, it's a big leap to go from lectures to, having students act out dialogues or tell stories together.
You're right. Not every teacher would be comfortable with that. Some might even see it as chaos.
And Mr. Semsem actually said his first instinct was to just ignore the feedback.
Really?
Yeah. But then he had this realization. If his students weren't really engaging with the material, were they even learning?
That's a powerful realization.
So he decided to just go for it.
Wow. So how did he make that shift? You can't just flip a switch and change your whole teaching style.
He basically went into research mode. He started reading all about these learner-centered approaches.
Interesting. Sounds like a real light bulb moment.
Yeah. He realized that stepping back from the spotlight could actually make learning more powerful for his students.
That's a big shift in mindset, to go from the sage on the stage to more of a facilitator.
Right. And that's when he started experimenting with all these new activities. Like pair share, role-playing, even having students create stories together. It became much more collaborative.
I love that. Instead of passively listening, they're actually doing things.
Exactly. And he said it was so much more fun. He actually told this funny story about a pair of students who were acting out a dialogue about a vacation. And the whole class was just cracking up.
That's great. Positive emotions make learning so much more effective.
Right. But it wasn't all sunshine and roses. He did run into some challenges.
Challenges? Like what?
Well, imagine being a student who's used to just sitting quietly, taking notes, and now you have to move around, interact, maybe even perform.
Oh, yeah. That would be intimidating for some students, especially the shy ones.
Exactly. And then there's the noise level, right? A classroom full of students actively discussing or role-playing is going to be louder than a traditional lecture.
Definitely.
So he had to get creative. To help the shy students, he made sure the instructions were clear, broke things down into smaller steps, and he'd check in with them individually to make sure they felt comfortable.
That's really thoughtful. It's like personalized support.
Yeah. And as for the noise, well, he kind of embraced it as a sign of a lively learning environment. Of course, there were still rules and routines, but a little bit of organized chaos was okay.
Sounds like he found that balance between structure and freedom, which is so important.
Right. So what advice did he have for other teachers thinking about making this shift? He kept it simple. Start small.
That's great advice. You don't have to do everything at once.
Exactly. He also said it's important to reflect on what works and what doesn't, and to get feedback from the students.
Makes sense. It's their learning experience after all.
So up next, we're going to see how all of this actually impacted his students and Mr. Semsem himself. So we've heard about Mr. Semsem's, journey, but did it actually work? Did his students actually learn more with this whole new approach?
That's the big question, right? Anyone can talk about theories, but seeing it in action, that's what matters.
And according to Mr. Semsem, it was like night and day. He said the students were like different people.
Really? How so?
More confident, way more engaged, actually excited about learning English. It wasn't just like a surface level thing either.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. He told this really powerful story about this one student who used to be totally terrified of speaking up in class. And the student actually said, quote, "I used to hate speaking, but now I feel like I can finally express myself."
Wow. That's incredible.
It just shows the impact that this kind of approach can have on a student's confidence. It's not just about the material, it's about them as learners.
Right. It's about creating that safe space to try things out, to make mistakes, to find their voice.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the students who changed. Mr. Semsem went through his own transformation too.
Oh, I bet. It's like you said, teaching is a two-way street.
He became so much more reflective about his teaching, more open to new ideas. And I think he started to see his students in a whole new way.
That's so important. The best teachers are always learning and growing.
Yeah. He said one of the biggest things he realized was that he was learning just as much from them as they were learning from him.
That's a really powerful realization for a teacher. To see the students as teachers, too.
It is. But Mr. Semsem didn't stop there. He's got some really interesting plans for the future.
Future plans? Like what?
Well, he's thinking about using even more technology in his classroom. Things like, those AI language apps to personalize learning even more.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about those. Really interesting stuff. So it's like taking that personalized approach even further.
Yeah. But he also talked about how important it is to connect with other teachers, share ideas, build a community.
Absolutely. Teachers need support. They shouldn't feel like they're on their own figuring all this out.
It's really like a movement,
Yeah.
towards this more engaging way of teaching and learning.
Yeah.
And it all started with this one teacher who was brave enough to, question how things were done and try something new.
It is inspiring, isn't it? It makes you wonder, what could happen if this happened in more schools?
Right. What if entire schools, even whole districts, just embraced this learner-centered way of doing things? What could parents do? Administrators?
Yeah.
Policymakers?
It's a big question. But it shows how important it is for everyone to be involved in creating a system where learning is, engaging and meaningful for every student.
Exactly. And I think Mr. Semsem's story really shows what's possible when we put learners at the center of it all.
It does. It's proof that even small changes can have a huge impact. And when teachers are encouraged to try new things and work together, incredible things can happen.
So to wrap up, we've seen how one teacher's willingness to, take feedback and try new things led to this amazing transformation in his classroom. We've talked about the power of learner-centered approaches, the importance of that intrinsic motivation, and how a supportive environment can make all the difference for students.
And we've also been thinking about the bigger picture, right? What kind of learning do we want for ourselves, for our kids, for our communities? What can we each do to make those learning experiences a reality?
And I think that's something worth thinking about. What can we do? Because the future of learning is in our hands. It's up to all of us to shape it. Thanks for joining us. We've seen what can happen when just one teacher changes their approach, right? But imagine if whole schools embrace this whole learner-centered thing.
It's a pretty amazing thought, like a whole school just buzzing with that energy, that engagement. But it's not just about teachers,
No,
right?
definitely not. It's got to be everyone, parents, administrators, even policymakers. Everyone has to kind of be on board to make it work.
Yeah, if parents encourage, curiosity at home, that reinforces what's happening in the classroom, right? And if administrators give teachers the right training and support, then it creates this culture where it's okay to try new things.
And I think it's important for the students to have a say too. They should be able to give feedback and help shape how they learn.
It's about moving away from this idea that education is something that's done to students and more towards something that they're a part of creating, like a partnership.
Exactly. So it's less about, one size fits all and more about what works for each student, their needs, their interests, all that.
Right. Imagine every student feeling seen, heard, and they can actually reach their full potential.
That's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And it all starts with, I think, understanding that learning isn't just about, memorizing stuff or passing tests. It's about creating this love of learning that lasts a lifetime.
Exactly. It's about giving people the tools to be curious, to be engaged, to be active citizens in the world.
And Mr. Semsem's story, I think, is a perfect example of what happens when we challenge, how things have always been done and try something new. And sure, there'll be challenges, but think about what we could achieve.
It's really inspiring. So as we finish up this deep dive, let's think about this. What kind of learning do we want for ourselves, for our kids, for our communities? And what can we each do, to make that happen?
What can we do? Because the future of learning, well, it's in our hands. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.